Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Avatar Top 10 video. This is going to be my top 10 worst or, bottom of the list episodes of Avatar and Korra. This list is going to be split into basically two separate lists of 5, so bottom 5 for Avatar, bottom 5 for Korra, and that's the way I'm going to do it rather than trying to compare this not great episode of Avatar versus this not great episode of Korra. So, let's just hop straight into this list. It's very obvious. It's the opposite of the top 10 list. It's the episode that I feel end up just bottom of the pile. I don't hate or really heavily dislike really any episode of Avatar or Korra. There's one that I'm just kind of yeah, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about it, but I still it's an enjoyable episode. All of the episodes are. So I just want to make that clear before I even start. So let's start off with Korra. I feel a lot more kind of solid with my Korra list in that for the most part, I think Korra is a super solid series. I don't think there are really many episodes that instantly spring to mind as being absolute bottom of the barrel. While with Avatar, The Last Airbender, I feel there's a lot more of a kind of short list for episodes that can go bottom of the list. So it's a lot more clear what my bottom 5 are for Korra. So let's start off with basically my 5th least favourite episode of Korra, and that is K303, The Earth Queen. Now, the reason I have this episode low on my list is because, yes, it's a good episode by itself. Just look at that episode. It's this really cool kind of almost reference to the City of Walls and Secrets, but it's the new Earth Queen and stuff like that. The problem with this episode is that the Earth Queen is super inconsequential in the grand scheme of Book 3. And Book 3's biggest problem is that it doesn't have enough time to resolve all of its plot points. So a whole episode, and then let's not forget the next episode is also about her. 2 whole episodes devoted to the Earth Queen, completely unnecessary given that her main role in the series is to be killed off by Zahir. So it just feels a little bit like wasted time that these 2 episodes, especially this one, could have covered other stuff that would have really helped pad out a lot of the characters in Book 3. So that's why the Earth Queen places low on my list. Individually, it's a fine episode. It's just, why do we need to focus on the Earth Queen when you're just going to kill her off? My number 4 pick is for very similar reasons, but I think it's a much worse example. And that is, my number 4 pick is K408, The Terror Within. Now, a lot of people maybe go wait, what? This episode has got a really cool action scene, investigation stuff. But think back to what I just said about the Earth Queen. Inconsequential stuff getting a lot of focus in an episode. This is basically the prime example of that. The whole second half of the episode is the hunt for Ai Wei, who betrayed Zhao Fu. Ai Wei's killed off in the next episode. You just kind of wasted 11 minutes trying to hunt this guy out, and you killed him off the next episode, and there's nothing of note happening here. Then the first half of the episode is just a complete action scene, and again, it's it's cool. Red Lotus, you always get some great action scenes with those guys, but we have a lot of action scenes with the Red Lotus in this book. We don't have any character for them. Not to mention Korra doesn't have a character, and what you do in this episode is just have her be a kidnap victim. She's unconscious most of the episode. She's not involved in the fight. The fight itself, I think, is really cool, but it's just one of those things where action ahead of character stuff, big flaw. So that's why this isn't my number 4 bottom. My number 3, third least favorite episode is K405, Peacekeepers. Now, for me, a lot of people say that the whole first half of Book 2 before Beginnings is really bad. But in my opinion, the only negative episodes in Book 2 are my number 3 pick here, Peacekeepers, and then the one I'm going to have for number 2, which I'll talk about in a moment. But Peacekeepers I have low on my list here because this, for me, is an episode where the romance stuff really becomes a problem. This is the episode where Mako and Korra break up. And it's not that I heavily ship Makora and I'm angry that they did that. I'm annoyed that the lead up to this, what happened. In that Mako and Korra are together as a couple at the end of Book 1. We start Book 2, which is 6 months later, and they're a couple, but they're arguing. And they don't really make it clear that, okay, they've been arguing for 6 months, this relationship is on rocky ground. They just have it so that they start arguing over this issue that comes up between the water tribes. It's not like the relationship was never going to work, and then they have them break up here over this really heated moment. It's just not a great episode in my opinion, and you know, the romance is definitely one of my biggest negatives with book 2, and this is just where one of the biggest, in my opinion, mistakes was made, in that this is the prime example. Makora is a relationship written in terms of the show, defined by just focusing on the drama. The drama about them getting together, and then the drama about them breaking up. The one thing we didn't get any focus on with Makora was them just as a couple, which is the one thing shippers actually want. So I think that was a really bad mistake they made with Peacekeepers. My number 2 pick is the episode and that follows that, K206, The Sting. And for me, this places so low on my list because, in my opinion, this is the single worst writing decision made in all of Avatar. Absolutely baffling, the decision that was made here. And that decision was to even attempt to try and put Mako and Asami back together as a couple. You had that breakup towards the end of book 1 that worked really well to kind of just show that the two, they do care about each other, but that relationship isn't going to work. And then just out of nowhere, you're in the middle of this Asami arc with Varric. Mako's just kind of proving himself. He's trying to clear his name. He's getting framed and stuff like this. And then you just do this in the middle of all of that. And it ruins basically both of their character arcs in the book. And it just creates this really drama-filled issue with the romance. Mako and Korra have just broken up, then you have Mako get back together with Asami, but they're not really back together because they never make it clear that they were ever really in a relationship in this book again. It just made absolutely no sense. Not to mention this episode and the one before, are the 2 episodes in book 2 that probably have the least amount of Korra, and Korra is definitely the highlight of book 2. The worst episode of Korra, in my opinion, and I would hope it's everyone's opinion, is K408 Remembrances. I didn't even remember what number episode it was. That tells a lot about this episode. Look, there's multiple reasons for this. One, by definition, it is the episode that the creators were kind of forced to make because of the budget cut by Nick, and that's really sad to hear. They did what they could, and that makes it the worst episode by definition. It is basically a filler episode because they had to fill in an episode with something they otherwise couldn't have filled it in with. Then, given that, okay, cool, they did what they could with the episode. I honestly think it's not a good episode. They could have done stuff with, given this idea that they had to do a kind of recap episode here, but they did absolutely nothing with it. And in my opinion, they just made bad decisions throughout. Like, it's so bad that the whole Mako recap of his whole journey throughout the entire show focuses completely, 100% on romance. You are basically telling us that this character's whole reason for being in the show was about romance drama, and you just have members of his family, Prince Wu, just making fun of Mako the whole time. I just didn't like this, that Mako section of the episode. I thought it was really just, you didn't get this character at all. Really poor show. The Korra stuff was just boring. Like, it didn't do anything. You just had this really good arc of, Korra's just about to kind of finish her recovery. She's back in the city with her friends. She's gotten past a lot of her issues, and then out of nowhere she's just like, oh, I've big doubts over being the Avatar. I can't help anyone. And then it's just Asami going like, oh no, in book 1 this happened, and then Korra's like, no, but this happened. But book 2 and this happened, no, this happened. And it's just this back and forth like, oh, you're great, yeah. And then Korra just has confidence at the end. Tenzin and Asami helped her. It doesn't really do anything. Like, there's a way to do these episodes where even if you don't have a lot of new content that you can actually add, you can have the characters just reflect on what's come before and really develop from it. Like, we had the Ember Island players, and that's a good example of what you can do with a recap episode. In that you have, like, say, Zuko. He watches basically the actor's portrayal of basically the Iroh-Zuko relationship and the problems that kind of developed towards the end of like book 2 and book 3, that betrayal that Zuko kind of did on Iroh. And you see the real Zuko, like, kind of almost remember, like, that's what this looked like, and it hits him hard. You have Aang reacting to the way the Katara-Aang relationship in the play is done, and he obviously wants a romantic relationship with Korra, but the kind of the playwright kind of just saw it as this kind of real heavy brother-sister thing. That's really cool, but this Remembrances, it just doesn't do anything. It manufactures these kind of things for this one episode, nothing happens with it. The Bolin and Varrick section is fun, and there's some funny moments in it, but again, you could have done something notable with Bolin. He actually had really good arcs in like book 2, 3, and 4, and had a nice little arc in book 1. And they just made fun of it the whole time. And yes, there's funny things with the villain phone call and stuff like that, but it wasn't worth just devoting like 7 minutes of an episode to. So I think it's a bit of a, like, I don't like to say skip any episodes when you rewatch the series, but this one, there's nothing to it. It's like you don't gain anything really by watching this episode, and that's a really bad thing to say about a show which is otherwise so packed full of episodes and content and amazing things happening. So, big problem there for me. So let's move into Avatar: The Last Airbender. And as I said, this one is a little bit harder for me to kind of just make this list in terms of like, oh, is this my 6th favorite episode or my 5th favorite least favorite episode? There's definitely a lot more episodes where I would put in more of a kind of, just it's good, solid, average tier, while there's very few in Korra. So my 5th least favorite episode of Avatar is 107 Winter Solstice Part 1 Spirit World. Now, the reason for this is because I think it's a very poor introduction to the idea of the spirit world in the Avatar universe. It's really confusing, and really it takes until Korra and you learning about Janora's technique to really fully understand what's going on here. Because it's not that Aang goes to the spirit world in this episode. No, he doesn't. We don't actually see the spirit world, full stop, in this episode. It's just that Aang's spirit is kind of taken out of his body, and his spirit is in the physical world, separate from his physical body. And that just isn't made obviously clear in this episode. There are some nice moments in it for sure, in that it's the first part of this kind of really plot-heavy thing to set up the story of Avatar: The Last Airbender. But just, it could have been done so much better. Like, we should have actually seen the spirit world in this episode. Like, Heibai is a really cool spirit to have. There's this idea that the Fire Nation destroyed this forest and Heibai's angry, and so he's attacking the people. Was interesting. That's where you get the whole idea that the Avatar needs to be in charge of like human spirit interactions. Cool, but it's a confusing mechanic episode in terms of understanding this universe. It just creates more problems than it does, because in the second part of the Winter Solstice you do actually get to see the spirit world when Aang and Roku meet, and it really takes until like the end of book 1 where you actually like properly see the spirit world to like get it. But yeah, my 4th least favourite episode of Avatar is 2 and 3, The Drill. And again, this one may shock a lot of people, but my problem with this episode is that you say the concept of this episode, like the walls of Ba Sing Se, the last remaining giant city in the world that the Fire Nation hasn't taken over, the last holdout. We get the Fire Nation built this giant drill that's been set up in like the episodes of Serpent's Pass and stuff like that, and you say this is the episode where they're going to attack the walls of Ba Sing Se, and they're going to try and get in and take the last city that they don't have. Wonderful. This is going to be such an epic and big episode, and no, it's a really small scale engagement. It's just the crew of this drill, and then like about a team of like 5 or 6 earthbenders, a couple of people up on the walls, and Team Avatar. This should have been battle stations for the Earth Kingdom. They should have had nearly every soldier in the city at the walls trying to stop this drill. But instead, the general on the wall just says, "Oh, my terror team failed. Team Avatar, you do it," and nothing happens from there. It felt so small in scale when it should have been huge, because they make a big deal about the fall of Ba Sing Se at the end of book 2 when it actually happens, and then you actually have a more military battle focused attempt here, and it just is made to seem a little bit pointless. Given that the drill is ultimately this kind of setup thing, and like the Earth King to convince him that the Team Avatar are telling the truth, this episode is just made to feel like a setup episode for that, rather than, oh, this could have actually won the Fire Nation the war if they had gone through. My third least favourite episode of Avatar The Last Airbender is Jet. And again, I think this is a good episode. It's one of the best animated episodes in Book 1. There's some really cool fights. I like Jet as a character. The problem is that the characterization for Aang and Katara is wrong in this episode. I think they're completely out of character in this episode. Being completely oblivious to like Sokka's logical points, and just putting all their faith in Jet, this guy they've just met that day. I get he's meant to be like charismatic and kind of be a good leader and get on their side. I get the comparison and kind of contrast they're trying to make between Jet and Sokka, but it's just one of those things where I don't logically understand why Sokka's sister and Aang would both turn on Sokka just because Jet's pretty cool. And then there's the whole thing of like, it's so obvious that Jet is trying to put the moves on Katara, and Aang is oblivious, and we know Aang really likes Katara, and he's just completely oblivious. So I really just don't like Aang specifically in the episode, but also Katara, who doesn't really seem like the sort of character to be like just swooning over a guy, really. So just some of those issues, and in a show that's so character focused and does characters so well, for this to be a big problem in this episode just makes it like a huge issue. My number 2 least favourite episode is The Great Divide. Even though I talked about it last week in terms of it being one of my episodes I really consider to be underrated, it's on this list as well because I honestly do think it is one of the lower ranked episodes in the series. I just don't have the insane negativity for the episode that a lot of other fans do, in that a lot of people single this one out as the one horrible episode of the series that's awful in every single way. I don't feel that way. I do feel it's one of the least kind of action-packed episodes in terms of something notable happening. It's a very kind of calm episode, and that is just, oh cool, we're going to get these 2 tribes across the canyon, we experience some animal problems throughout, Aang's going to try and help them out, some fun character little stuff happens. It's just bottom of the list because, not a lot notable happens in the episode. I don't think it's awful, and I don't think it really has any like problems in terms of, I don't feel any of the characters are like out of character, like what I said with Jet. It's just like, it's one of those episodes that, like, it's not a filler episode, but if it was a different show, it probably would be considered a filler episode. My least favourite episode of Avatar The Last Airbender is 309 Nightmares and Daydreams, purely because I feel half of this episode is actually filler. And that is the whole Aang section of the episode with Nightmares and Daydreams. And you spend, it's more than half of the episode, it's about probably 15 minutes of the episode is spent on Aang. He's meant to be like dealing with this heavy issue of he's getting nervous before the big battle. That they're setting it up that this battle is going to be the last battle as far as the characters are aware. And Aang is kind of unsure about how things are going to go, and he's having a hard time dealing with that. Now that sounds like a cool concept for an episode. Unfortunately, they make it way too comedy focused where it should be more serious. And they really only have one proper nightmare in the episode. The rest of them are just these kind of weird, funny daydreams, have like weird anime references throughout. And I don't have any problem with anime references, it's just that a lot of them were so like over my head. I was just like, what are you referencing here? It just felt a little bit weird, like they're talking about math tests and you're going crazy with the way Ozai is being portrayed, and it's just like, this is just not very important. Like, this could be a really cool little thing of just Angus dealing with these nightmares, and you deal with it in a serious way, how he gets over it. But ultimately, it's just 15 minutes of, let's make some funny daydreams and some freaky nightmares, and then have all of the characters try and come up with these humorous ways to get him over these things. And in the end, let's just make it the power of friendship and belief in Aang that gets him over these things. And I'm fine with that. I don't have any problem with that being used from time to time. But it seemed like such a serious issue that to have it be such a kind of lackluster resolution, it seemed just like a waste of a kind of plot point that you had. I know I do like the Zuko parts of this episode, and I think it's a really important step in him making the big decision to, finally decide with Team Avatar and stuff like that. The Zuko part of the episode is actually really good. It's just that I feel like that should have been the main part of the episode rather than, most of it being Aang dealing with these nightmares and stuff like that. So this episode's lowest on my list because this is the episode before your mid-season finale. It should be setting that up much more intensely, clearer, and it just feels a little bit fillery, and I don't like that. So they're my least favourite episodes of Avatar and Korra. Let me know in the comments what you consider to be your bottom of the pile episodes. And again, I like all of these episodes. I think Remembrances is the one episode of both series that I'm just kind of like, I don't really have many positive things to say about that episode, but still, it's well animated for what it is. It's clips of other episodes which are well animated, and the new things that they have in there are fun. But there's so little effort gone into that episode, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't quite have the next week top 10 list decided. But you'll see when that comes out on Wednesday what exactly it is. But for now, thanks for watching this video, and bye.